Hare Krishna. Welcome to the Q&A session of Bhagavad Gita series today. So we will start with the Mangalacharan prayers. I will share those prayers on the screen and we will recite them. So share the screen and Bhagavad Gita introduction. And here are the prayers. First, we'll offer prayers to Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupah Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenbandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay. So, like always, I will give a very quick overview of what we went over in the main class yesterday. The expectation is that you listen to the class or hear the class and read the relevant portion of Srimad Bhagavad Gita before the Q&A session, and that way we can, have the Q&A based on what we discussed. But in any case, please post your questions on the chat or raise your hand. And I have several questions that are pending from previous discussions, which we can also cover. So yesterday we covered. Let me go to my screen sharing again. I will just use the Jamboard session from yesterday. Let me open it at my end. Yeah. So yesterday we covered what I call as section 4b of the chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita. And this section, section 4 is basically 40 to 53, and 4b is this one, 47 to 53. And in this section, we are basically talking about Nishkama Karma Yoga. So we went over this section 4b. So this is 4b over here. This one, 47 to 53. And in this section, there are two subparts. One is the core concept of Nishkama Karma Yoga and the benefits of Nishkama Karma Yoga. We already talked about some level of Karma Kanda and Sakama Karma Yoga in the previous discussion, where Lord Krishna was first talking about doing your duty to gain name, fame, power, victory, honor, all those things. And then he spoke about how the Vedas propound various methods and procedures for success in life, but those are also things that are providing material benefits. Nishkama Karma Yoga is the first process that provides spiritual benefits, as we will see in this section, last part of the 4b, 50 to 53, benefits of Nishkama Karma Yoga. So we discussed those things basically. Nishkama Karma Yoga starts with the most famous verse of the sort of the most popular verse of Bhagavad Gita, Karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phalaheturbhur Mate Sangostva Akarmani. So we discussed in detail the breakdown of this verse. We broke it down into the 4 parts. Karmani eva adhikaraste. You have the right to do your duty, which means you must do your duty. You must never neglect it. The last part says, always be attached to doing the duty. Never be attached to the results. That is the meaning of the second and third parts, B and C, that you must never consider yourself the proprietor or the rightful owner of the results of the duty. And never think, and the reason for that is number C, the third part of the verse, which is Ma karma phalahetur bhu, that never think you are the only cause. We claim rightful ownership of something when we are the only cause of that, but we are not the only cause. So we are the cause of desiring or hoping that it happens, but we are not the only cause in making it happen. And we discussed that in detail. So the message or the key concept of this verse, Karmanyevadhikaraste, is to act without attachment of results, but with attachment to the duty itself. And so I explained this sort of in this very simple sort of way, that to the duty itself, one must be attached, but to the results, one must not be attached to the results. And when you do your duty, that is when we get true happiness. And that happiness cannot be measured against the happiness from simply the results. The results do not provide as much happiness as in performing the work if you have found what you love to do. Now, we went a little bit more into the details of it, but I will just say that yesterday someone forwarded me 2 stories about someone, very beautiful stories, which kind of very nicely explain or demonstrate this concept. I had mentioned about something that Zakir Hussain, the tabla maestro, and then Pandit Ravi Shankar, who is the sitar maestro, said. And I also mentioned about some examples that I have seen in my life about musicians and mathematicians. But these 2 examples were also very nice. One was the example where, if you know that Akbar had a very accomplished singer, Tansen, in his whatever ministry. And Tansen was the most accomplished singer that Akbar had ever come across. So one time Akbar was talking to Tansen and saying, there's nobody greater than you in singing. Tansen said, no, that's not true. My Guru Haridas ji is greater than me. He said, you must be just saying this out of respect for your Guru, but you are the greatest. He said, no, I'm not saying this out of respect for my Guru. I'm really, literally saying this. He says, really? So why don't you call him here? And I want to hear him. He said, you know what? You may be the emperor, but even if you call, he will not come. Because he does not, he's not subservient to anyone. We have to go there if we want to listen to him. So Akbar was a nice person. And he said, okay, let's go. So when he went there, then Tansen ji told him that we have to hide behind his house to hear his, rag or his singing. He said, why can't you say that the emperor has come to your house? Why don't you sing? He said, no. He will not sing if you are there. Let him sing whenever he wants. We will just have to listen when we are hiding. He said, okay. So they waited all night. And at midnight, Haridas ji started singing. And Akbar was relishing his singing. And he kept singing the whole night. And Akbar was absorbed in his singing. And he said that this singing is way at a higher level than Tansen. And he was convinced that there is that Haridas ji is the greatest singer. So on the way back, Akbar asked asked Tansen, why cannot you sing like him? Okay. And Tansen gave a beautiful answer. He says, when I am singing for you. I am conscious that you are the audience. and therefore I cannot produce my best. When he is singing simply for the joy of his own singing. He does not care who is the audience. He is singing. His joy and his happiness that he is getting out of the singing is not based on someone else's acknowledgement or appreciation or anything. This is what I am adding. I have, Tansen meant that I have that sakama feeling that somebody is, so that, therefore the joy and the whole situation diminishes. On the other hand, when he is singing, he's just singing, for his attachment to singing itself, not to the output. Maybe he made many mistakes during the singing, but that is not the point. Nobody is there to judge whether there was a mistake or not. So that is one very nice example. Another example that was given was of a painter, Vincent van Gogh, very, very famous painter. And his story is that he would paint just for the joy of painting. And nobody knew he was a great painter or anything. Now he's known as one of the world's greatest painters. And his painting, I was reading last night after I came to know about this, one of his paintings sold for $500 million, billion with a B, not million. So such famous are his paintings. And at that time, nobody knew him, and he would just paint and give his paintings to his friends. His friends, when he would come to his house, they would put it up on their wall, and after he left, they would throw away the painting or put it away in the, in the storage or in the garage or wherever. And next time he would again come, he would not even notice that his previous painting has been removed. He would give them another painting just because he loved to paint and he didn't have anything to do. He would give it to other people. And they would put it up when he was there just to make him happy, and then, take it down. So like that, I don't know exactly how the story went, but later on, he was discovered that his paintings were one of the greatest in the world. And then all his friends pulled out all those paintings from their, wherever they had thrown them away or stashed them away, and they all became millionaires because they sold his paintings, which sold for millions. So it seems he could not ever enjoy the results or the fruits of his painting, but his friends enjoyed it because he just would give it away. So another example of not working for the results, but working for the sheer joy of the work itself. And of course, when that happens, then there is no limit, or there is no, that joy is unsurpassable. Forget the result also. I mean, of course, in the case of Haridas ji or in this Vincent van Gogh, the paintings were of the highest order or the caliber, or his singing was of the highest caliber. But even if the output is mediocre, that is not the point. Or the fact that later on somebody discovered that the output or the phal was so sweet. That is not the point at all. So don't misunderstand the point. The point is the joy that that person is getting out of doing the work. That is the main point. And his joy, we know of these stories because the output is so great, because the phal is so great, and whoever is printing and publishing and advertising these stories cares about the phal. But maybe right next door, your neighbor may be so interested in doing something that he's absorbed in it. The phal may not be sweet, but he's getting the joy. Maybe there is somebody in your own house. Maybe you are that person who loves to do something, and that is what you should do. That is Nishkama Karma Yoga. Regardless of what the phal is or whether others realize, we publicize, we share stories where everything in the material world is based on the sweetness of phal. That is the problem. Even sharing other people's stories is based on phal. So there must be thousands of such stories where the phal is not so sweet, but for the person doing the karma, it really doesn't matter what the output is. That is the main point. So I think I have described Nishkama Karma Yoga enough. We went through other verses, 2.48, where one should do the duty based on equipoised in success or failure, which means not considering phal at all, detached from results. This is Nishkama Karma Yoga. And stay far away from sinful activities. My iPad got locked. Yeah. So stay far away from sinful activities, act by applying our intelligence, taking shelter of the intelligence. Sharanam, Buddhayo Sharanam, it says. Um, uh, Buddhayo Sharanam Anvichha. And otherwise, you are just selling yourself cheap. You are a miser. So then we talked about the benefits of Nishkama Karma Yoga. The benefits are, we talked about all this. Yes, the benefits are that one can get rid from the reactions of work. What the reactions, whether the work is successful or unsuccessful, good reaction or bad reaction, that does not affect the person at all. So the reactions of the work are one is freed from that, as you can see from all these examples, and one gets the sheer joy of work itself, and that joy is unsurpassable. Then at the highest stages, when one does this, one even can get spiritual realization, getting free from birth and death, and going to a higher abode where there is no misery, this place of anamayam, gachanti anamayam, where there is no misery. Nothing can impact or hurt you. Now, it seems that Vincent van Gogh was not at that level. And it seems that I was just reading about him after I came to know of his story that somebody forwarded very kindly, that he committed suicide. So he was not experiencing apparently that much joy and happiness. And he had material troubles, material miseries. So again, another point to be stressed is that performing Nishkama Karma Yoga in this world is very hard. Performing it to the highest level is very hard. So the instruction, therefore, is that this Nishkama Karma Yoga is not the, in the yoga ladder, it is not. So let me show this. This is an important point. Here in this yoga ladder, Nishkama Karma Yoga is not the final message of the Bhagavad Gita. The final message is Bhakti Yoga. And when one performs, and Bhakti Yoga can be performed very easily, and even by people who are not very advanced. So Nishkama Karma Yoga is very, very hard to perform. And that's why there is a lot more in the Bhagavad Gita. Otherwise, the Bhagavad Gita would have ended here. But Nishkama Karma Yoga can easily be applied to Bhakti Yoga. And how to apply Nishkama Karma Yoga to Bhakti Yoga, we will see in the future chapters. So, that is the point. So I think I will stop here. And those were the key points that we covered. So yeah, so we will. So now let us see if there are questions. So there are some questions on the chat. Let me take them up. And also I will open a new Jamboard for our session today. Okay, need my glasses. So one question is, the Srivatsa mark, I think you're talking about. What is the significance of the mark on the forehead of the devotees like the one you have? So the Vaishnava devotees, the question that is being asked is many devotees put this kind of mark, or it's a tilak. So like this kind of a tilak they put on their forehead like I have. And what is the significance of that? So very simply, the significance is to remind ourselves, first of all, ourselves, that this tilak, this is called tilak. So it's a mark or a tilak. And it is made from the mud of Vrindavan. That's what it is made of, and it is sold in Vrindavan. And we get those packets. It is sold in various temples. So it is a tilak, and it is a mark to remind ourselves that uh, our body is a temple of God. God resides within the body as Paramatma. So, so that and body is not just made of the five gross elements, but it is also made up of. So, body is made up of the physical elements plus mind, intelligence, and ahankar, or false ego, what we naturally call as ego, plus the physical elements, I will call it, or the gross elements: air, water, earth, fire, ether. So we get reminded, or we remind ourselves, that the body, God is residing in our body, and therefore this is a temple of God. And we should respect the temple. We should keep the temple clean. We should keep the temple clean. We should remind ourselves that. And the most important thing to keep clean is our mind. So we remind ourselves that, and on every temple you will see a mark. Even on the church, you see the church sign, sign like this on the top of the church. On many Vaishnava temples, you will see a chakra. And it is the Sudarshan chakra of Lord Vishnu. And all the temples have some kind of mark. And this is just a mark on the body, which our acharyas have advised us to put on to remind ourselves and to remind other people and to inspire other people to think that this body is a temple of God and we should keep it clean. And clean means not just physically clean, but also mentally clean, clean from the heart. And what does it mean? Then you will say, to keep the mind clean. That is the whole discussion we will have in Bhagavad Gita at many places. Again, I don't want to go too deep into that. Okay, so that is the purpose of the tilak. This tilak, this part is indicating a tulsi leaf. Tulsi leaf. Tulsi is the most dear plant of Lord Krishna. It's the most sacred Vaishnava plant. So this is denoting a tulsi leaf. And these two lines are denoting, one is our effort in bhakti. So we must do that, put our effort in bhakti. This other line is devoting Lord's mercy upon us. So when we perform bhakti, and when the Lord's mercy is there, and when they both combine over here, so our effort is going and Lord's mercy is coming, and then we get the mercy of Tulsi Devi. Tulsi Devi, Tulsi is not just a leaf, but it is a personification of a person called Tulsi Devi. Tulsi Devi resides in the Tulsi plant. So Tulsi Devi is a great devotee of Lord Krishna. And when our effort in bhakti and the Lord's mercy both combine, then we can hope to become or follow in the footsteps of great devotees like Tulsi Devi and become devotees of Lord Krishna. So that is the whole symbolic the meaning of this tilak. And I explained why we put tilak on our body and all that. So that's the answer to the question. Okay. Next question is, how do we know that we are getting much more closer to God and getting detached from the material world? Very nice question. How do we know? How do we measure ourselves? So, as I had told, one of the things that we have to measure is our attachments. So, measure your attachments. Point number one. Am I on the right screen? Okay. Something is going wrong here. Can you see this? Where what I wrote? Number 1, measure your attachments. Is it? Okay, good.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, very good, very good. Somehow on my side, it is not updating very fast. It's okay. Okay. So measure your attachments. That is the first step. And the second step is you can only measure something, or you can measure the change when you are putting an effort to change it. Otherwise, it will stay constant. Correct? You will not know whether it is not changing because the value is not changing or because your measurement system is wrong. Understand? Sometimes when you have to measure your temperature, have you seen when you have fever, sometimes the temperature needle or the thermometer always shows the same value. But when you touch with your hand, you feel, no, he's so warm, he's so hot. So you don't know whether the person does not have fever or the thermometer is wrong. Correct? You get another thermometer to check the right temperature. So my point is, you must try to change the value to see whether it is changing. Otherwise, you won't know whether there is a problem in the measurement or there is a problem in the actual value of the reading itself. My point, so I went into a little bit side tangent, but my point is, try to reduce your attachments and try to reduce genuinely, sincerely, seriously, and one more word I will add, with a sense of urgency. So these may sound similar words, they are, but this urgency word is little different from the previous three: genuine, sincere, serious. Those are similar words, but urgency as well. And then try to continuously measure your attachments. I guarantee you that you will see that, yes, I'm getting a little bit more detached, more detached, more detached. At this level where we are right now, there is a long list, which I will say as we go along. But at this level, try to do this, measuring your attachments. Whenever something happens that you don't like, it is not just attachments to things. Oh, I'm not attached with my iPhone, so I will give it up. Not just to things. Yes, that is one thing. Not getting too attached to it. Now, iPhone can be used for spiritual needs as well. I'm sending all these text messages to people, trying to connect with devotees and all that. So iPhone itself is not a problem, just like knife is not a problem. Knife in the hands of a killer is a problem. Knife in the hands of a surgeon is needed. Surgeon cannot do surgery without a knife. Then he will not be able to cure people. So attachments are mainly in the mind. So when I'm talking about attachments, try to work on attachments in your mind. When somebody says something to you and you get hurt, try not to get hurt the next time. Try to really realize that nothing is ours. What am I getting hurt about? Why am I giving the feeling of this other person to control my happiness? So in that way, try to see that what all is hurting you and try to come out of that. So and the other thing that I tell many people, keep a little log, keep a little diary, write down when you observe something. Yes, this is something I did. Positively write it down. That is a very, very powerful technique. Another technique that you must use is in the morning, go over the list of things. It's like in the morning, going over a list of your prescriptions, that today I have to take this medicine at 8 o'clock, this medicine at 10 o'clock, this medicine at 12 o'clock. Write down these things. I must be tolerant today. Remind yourself, put a big printout in big font, put it in your bedroom, so that when you, or put it on your ceiling, so that when your eyes open, you see that, oh, this is what I have to focus on today. And it does not take any extra time. It's just about a matter of being who you are being. Go live your life with tolerance. Keep reminding yourself and keep measuring how many times today I could have been triggered due to any reason, but I did not. And write it down. And that is your measurement, and you will see your list growing. That is your measurement. And that is when you know that you're making progress. Because with a cleaner and a calmer mind, it is going to be much easier to perform bhakti, which is the upcoming topic in Bhagavad Gita. With a very agitated mind, usne aisa kar diya, usne aisa kiya, he did this, he did that, or whatever it is, why did he do this, why that, why, who, this, that. When the mind is clouded by all this, then the sincere bhakti and with a sense of urgency, it is very hard to happen. So it is very important that we clean up our mind so that we can fill it up with bhakti. So I hope that answers that question, but this is a long question and we will continue to answer it throughout the session. Next question is, somebody is asking, many people have so much joy in being lazy and not doing anything. Lazy and not doing anything. Then the next part of the question is how to motivate them into Nishkama Karma Yoga. So there are two parts to the question. First is joy in doing the above, doing these things, being lazy. Is there a joy? That is question number one. The second one, how to motivate them into Nishkama Karma Yoga. I would say don't worry about others at this stage. First, work on yourself. You cannot give anything to others that you do not have. Can you? I am asking you for $1 million. Can you give me? Money does not grow on trees. So you cannot give me if you don't have. So first, we must try to build it on ourselves. In Bhagavad Gita, there is a very nice verse in chapter 3. We will cover 3.29. Let us open 3.29. What does it say? .29, chapter 3, verse number 29. What does it say? Can you read it? Who asked this question? Go ahead, unmute yourself and read this.
Bewildered by the modes of material nature, the ignorant fully engage themselves in material activities and become attached. But the wise should not unsettle them, although these desires are inferior due to the performer's lack of knowledge.
You see, there are people who will do all kinds of foolish things in life. And they are bewildered by the modes of material nature. But the wise people should not unsettle them. So don't worry about trying to what to say to them. And there is an answer also as to what you can do. And that answer is coming later in the chapter in this. Let me find that verse. Number 26. Read this.
So as not to disrupt the minds of ignorant men attached to the fruitive results of prescribed duties, a learned person should not induce them to stop work. Rather, by working in the spirit of devotion, he should engage them in all sorts of activities for the gradual development of Krishna consciousness.
Very nice. Thank you so much. So what is being said here in Bhagavad Gita is that, first of all, you should focus on yourself first. And if you really see somebody at a very low level of existence, somebody who is very lazy and finds joy in not doing anything, like you said, first of all, don't unsettle them. don't try to inspire them into Nishkama Karma Yoga. That's too big of a jump for them. Rather, somehow start taking small steps. What is written here is that it in a different context, that here it is written for somebody who is engaged in fruitive work. He's engaged in phala. Okay, what you are talking is about mode of ignorance. One who is engaged in fruitive work is called in the mode of passion, which is above the mode of ignorance. Here is what I'm talking about. So let me give a quick sort of a overview. There is called Satguna, or mode of goodness. Then there is mode of passion. And then there is mode of ignorance. Satguna, Rajoguna, and Tamoguna. Okay. This is where in the mode of passion is where one is caring for phala. Too much desire for fruits is there. In mode of ignorance is laziness and all kinds of the other things that you mentioned, not wanting to do anything and all that. And mode of goodness is where all the good qualities exist. So what is being said is that somebody who is in the mode of phala, always in the mode of passion, fruits, and I want to enjoy the fruits, don't unsettle them. Try to dovetail, try to tell them that, okay, if this is what you are doing, do a little bit for Krishna. Without them knowing that I am doing it, let them think I am doing it for the sake of phala. Okay, but inspire them to somehow direct or channel their activities gradually, step by step, slowly into the side of goodness. That is the answer given in 3 point, or that is what is mentioned in 3.26. What is mentioned in 3.29 is that don't unsettle them or don't give them too much of a big jump. So somebody who's in the mode of laziness, instead of taking him to Nishkama Karma Yoga, which comes in the mode of goodness or even above the mode of goodness, we will cover this in chapter 14. You are taking them, your question is asking, how can I bring them here? No, don't worry about that. First, try to bring them here to the mode of passion. It goes in sequence. Try to tell them, don't be lazy, do something nice with your life. Go earn some money so you will enjoy. That enjoyment of money is better than laziness. First, bring them from ignorance to passion. And then you can bring them from passion to goodness. And why are you going after money, money, money? Go after something higher. And then you can go to even higher, slowly. But later on in the, so this is the answer right now for you. Later on, as we make progress in Bhagavad Gita, the same laziness, you can ask them to transform into bhakti. The jump from laziness to Nishkama Karma Yoga, this jump over here is very big. But the jumping to bhakti is never big. Never. From Nishkama Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, and then Bhakti Yoga. Want to jump, or you can say Karma Kanda, or even before Karma Kanda, there comes, I will just put it here, animal life. And in animals also, there are all kinds of animals. One animal could be a bear who sleeps for 6 months. What you're saying, always lazy and all. The jump from here or here or here or from this to this is very hard. But from all these places, the jump to Bhakti Yoga is easy. This you will understand as we go further into Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, Bhakti Yoga is the recommended process as per Bhagavad Gita. So for now, just try to inspire them to get out of laziness. If the person is so lazy.
Just like you are doing to us now. through these classes.
Okay, I don't know what I am doing, but whatever benefit you are getting, I'm happy
No,
that.
we are very much benefited, sir.
Thank you very much. All glory to Srila Prabhupada.
Could
who
I,
gave us this
could
knowledge.
I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Now you said that we have to the jump to the Bhakti Yoga is the easiest.
Yes.
To jump the Bhakti Yogas, I should know the Bhakti is the most important and easiness by
Yes.
Jnana Yoga. So without Jnana Yoga, I won't be able to know the Bhakti Yoga is the superior.
No.
So I should know the Bhakti Yoga.
Mhm. Yes. Jnana Yoga, you don't know what is Jnana Yoga yet. Okay, that is the problem. You are just focusing on the word Jnana as
Yes.
knowledge. That's all you are doing, nothing more. Yes, you have to have knowledge.
Yes.
That knowledge, that Jnana about Bhakti. Okay, that Jnana about Bhakti is very simple. We can cover it in 1 hour. Jnana of Bhakti is not very hard. We will cover it in 4th chapter.
Okay.
It has only 15 verses, number 1 to 15. The rest of the chapter of chapter 4 is called Jnana Yoga. And that is exactly why Lord Krishna orchestrates this chapter in such a way that the Jnana about Bhakti, we call it Jnana Mishra Bhakti. It is Bhakti, but mixed with little bit of Jnana about Bhakti. And Lord Krishna gives that in the very beginning. Chapter 4 is actually 42 verses. The first 15 verses, and in fact, not only 15, only the first 11 verses for that matter, or the first 12 verses, 11 or 12, we can say up to 15, are about Bhakti. That is all you need to know. The rest of the verses from number 16 to 42 are what is known as the real sort of I wouldn't say real, because real Jnana is about Bhakti. So I won't use the word real, but the more sort of, what should I say? The traditional Jnana Yoga. What do you spell?
Sorry, are you writing something? We are not able to see.
Oh, I am writing on the next slide. Oh my God. Sorry. Thank you for pointing out. So 16 to 42 is this traditional Jnana Yoga. And this traditional Jnana Yoga is all about the knowledge or Jnana of matter and spirit. That is the Jnana, the traditional understanding of Jnana. And to differentiate matter from spirit and try to understand the nature of both. What is matter, what is spirit, and that whole, all those details. But the whole point is keeping God aside. Keep God aside. Just focus on the nature of God, but you don't call it the nature of God. You just call it spirit. That is what we had covered in verse numbers 11 to 30 of chapter 2. Lord Krishna never mentions himself in that, never even mentions he is the Paramatma or anything. It is the Jnana about what is known as the one who is occupying the body. Who is that? He does not even give a name. The only name that closest comes to that is Dehi. Dehi means the resident of the Deha.
Yeah.
So that is traditional Jnana Yoga, and that takes lifetimes to understand. But Jnana about Bhakti is very simple, which we will cover in chapter 4. And with that much Jnana, what you do is you ascend to the level of Bhakti and you say, okay, now I understand that Bhakti, performing Bhakti is the highest and the easiest. It is what you call cheap, better, or cheap, good, and fast. In modern world, they say, there are 3 attributes of any product: cheap, fast, and good. You can get any 2, but you cannot get all 3. If you want fast and good, it will be expensive. It won't be cheap. If you want fast and cheap, it won't be good. If you want fast and good, it will be, or whatever, cheap and good, it will be slow. not fast, whatever. Okay, we use these terminologies, but bhakti yoga is cheap, fast, and good. It's very easy, it's very quick, and it is the best. And with little bit of gyan about bhakti, you should start performing bhakti. You can skip all the stages of all these other stages that we had discussed in the ladder of the yoga ladder. And this will become very clear, very clear in the instructions of one of the great acharyas in our parampara, whose name is Rupa Goswami. He makes it abundantly clear and substantiates it very clearly in his work, which is known as Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. The English translation or a summary study has been given by Srila Prabhupada, and that is called Nectar of Devotion book. And this book we do not cover. This is not part of Bhagavad Gita. This is our acharyas. Sri Rupa Goswami is one of the greatest acharyas in the parampara that we have. And we do another course called Bhakti Shastri, where we cover 4 books: Bhagavad Gita, and this one, Nectar of Devotion, Nectar of Instruction, and Sri Isopanishad. We do these 4 books. And in Nectar of Devotion, this point will become abundantly clear. I don't want to spend time right now, that how easy it is to jump from any stage directly to bhakti, and with lot of substantiating statements and verses from Srimad Bhagavatam. So all that will be covered, but Srila Prabhupada is just stating that, and I am stating that as well on the basis of what Srila Prabhupada has said. But the proof of all that is given in these books, in the writings of acharyas, which further they substantiate through very authentic and authorized Vedic scriptures like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, so that answers that other question that you had about Gyan, about Bhakti. Okay, so you do not have to undergo the full traditional Jnana Yoga.
Yeah, okay, I understood, but you had to know a little bit of jnana to understand the bhakti. But
Yes.
yes, I made a mistake. It's not a jnana yoga. Yoga is a relationship with the God. So when you say a jnana yoga is the knowledge relation to with God. Yes, I should not mention jnana yoga. I should mention jnana.
Yeah.
To understand the bhakti. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and this is also, we can call it Jnana Yoga about Bhakti. That's fine. Again, but the point is the perfection of Jnana Yoga itself takes lifetimes. Our goal should be to perfect Bhakti Yoga.
Yeah, but to understand the bhakti, you need a little bit of jnana.
Yes.
So-
Yes. Yes, agreed, 100%.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I got another question.
Hello. To
Yes, let's
understand
take-
bhakti, you need jnana, he says, and you agree with that. But bhakti is something which is God gift. Person may not know anything, but it comes from within. If a person has that God gift, he will be involved in bhakti, even without jnana.
These are all very deep topics, actually. These are not simple topics.
Yes, but what I wanted to say is bhakti can be had even without jnana. Because
Yes.
a person just knows that God exists and he has full faith in him. He
Yeah,
can
so
do
that
bhakti.
Yes, that simple knowledge that
Mhm.
God is my master. There is a God, Bhagwan Krishna or Bhagwan Ram or whoever.
Mhm.
That little bit, and I did not say that it has to be at least 15 verses minimum. Less than 15 is not Gyan with Bhakti, Jnana Mishra Bhakti. Just one line, one word can be the Jnana. Just one word, that Krishna is my dearmost Bhagavan. That one line is the knowledge. Again, we are getting too much into the details or splitting hair about it. But just that basic faith that my dear Lord Krishna is my Lord itself is that knowledge that convinces the heart to do bhakti. So let's not go into too much detailed debate into how much gyan is needed or not, but you're absolutely right that no gyan, or that minimal gyan, that there is Bhagwan and he is my Bhagwan, he is my master, that itself is more than enough for a bhakta to perform bhakti. There used to be this very, very great devotee of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he was completely illiterate, and he even used to hold the Bhagavad Gita in front of him, or like a, you know, he would think like this is the front of the book. He did not even know whether to open the book from the front page or from the back page. Like, you know, like sometimes, you know, the Arabic books open from the back page, right? They go like from the back and to the front, so to say. He did not know how to even open the book front or back. He used to just keep the back of the book in his hand, and he used to feel so happy. Other people who were more literate, all the Brahmanas, used to make fun of him, that you are holding Bhagavad Gita, but you don't even know which side is the right side to open the book. They used to make fun of him. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu one time then came to him and asked, why are you holding the Bhagavad Gita when you don't know how to read it? And he said that this Bhagavad Gita I have heard has the words of my Lord. The words that were actually spoken by my dear Lord are contained in this book. I don't know what those words are. I don't know what those mean. But just when I'm holding this book in my hand, I get so much happiness because it has the words of my Lord. That knowledge itself, Lord Chaitanya then embraced him. He hugged him. He said, you are the greatest devotee. That is all you need to know. There is nothing more than that needs to be known. Rest, everything is bhakti or bhava bhakti. The bhava in the heart is all that is important. So all these are deeper topics as to what causes bhakti. You should read chapter 5 of Nectar of Devotion if you are so interested. I'm not just making some general statements and just BSing here, as one would say. Chapter 5, I think it is chapter 5 of Nectar of Devotion. It talks about the cause of bhakti. The whole section, chapter 3 to 5 in Nectar of Devotion, talks about what is the cause of bhakti. And Rupa Goswami says the only cause of bhakti, the only cause, is mercy of another devotee. This is all very scientifically given. Okay, so this is not just some humbug or some hollow words. So you are absolutely correct in that sense. But for people who are inclined to get proof, which is what most of the people in the modern world are, our education and everything has prompted us, no, convince me. We need a lot of convincing. For such people, more gyan, bhakti-oriented gyan that is given, it convinces them to perform bhakti. Because for everything we need conviction. Because also there is too much cheating in this world. If I just tell you, do bhakti, forget Bhagavad Gita, you don't need Bhagavad Gita, just do japa, Ram Naam Jap or Krishna Naam Jap. Will you do it? You say, what is this person? Iska kuch agenda, he must have a hidden agenda. Today he's asking me to do this. Tomorrow then he will say, okay, become my disciple, come touch my feet. Then give me all your money. Iska kuch man mein chor hai. Something is there in his, let me get away from him. Let me go, let me not associate with this person. Ye to chor hai. We have been cheated so many times that without solid proof, unless we are convinced, we don't want to take up a process. But when a person is very simple, then he does not ask for too much proof. He trusts and he moves forward. For such a person, gyan is not needed. And now it depends on how simple or how trusting you are on this process as to how much gyan you will need. Some people, after hearing the whole Bhagavad Gita, they say, yeah, I have done Bhagavad Gita course. let me go and, eat, drink, mastro, khao, piyo, mastro. So they're not convinced. Some people, just by hearing the name, or even from birth itself, from prior janma, they are just great devotees. And then there is whole spectrum in between.
Yes, I would like to say here this
everyone-
Tyagaraja, Purandaradasa, they composed songs, just singing Lord's songs. They did not have any knowledge of anything, but just the love of God, they composed songs.
See, they are messengers of God. They
Yes,
are
they
not
are messengers.
ordinary people. Many of them, there is a difference which is known as Nitya Siddha. Again, I'm going into much deeper topics, but somehow the discussion is going in that direction. And then there are Sadhana Siddha.
Sir, but we are also messengers of God.
No,
No, why not? Everybody, in everyone, there is a God.
so look, I don't want to have a debate on things.
Yes,
Which-
sir.
I am the teacher, you are the student. So try
Yes,
to
sir.
understand, ask a question in a question manner,
Okay, sir.
not as an argument. Why
Okay,
not?
sir.
It is like this.
Okay.
Why not? I am not entitled to prove to you why not.
Okay, sir. Got it.
Have a mood of a student.
Okay, sir.
So what I was explaining is Nitya Siddha and Sadhana Siddha. Nitya Siddha are people who are already liberated. Okay? And they are the messengers of God, whom God says, you are already in the spiritual world. But I want you to go into the material world and go and send my message to these people. I had gone myself. 5,000 years ago, I went myself. 500 years ago, I again went as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But still, people are not coming back to me. My children are not coming to me. Why don't you go and tell them? Maybe they will listen to you. They are the messengers of God. They are already liberated. Nitya Siddha. Nitya means they are already liberated. And God sends them to the material world with his message. These are the acharyas. So please try to understand what I mean by Nitya Siddha, what my definition of messenger of God is. We can all...
Yes,
this
sir.
is
I
mess-
got it.
Let me
I
finish.
got it.
Let me finish. I'm just talking because there are no more questions. I'm giving a longer explanation because there is time. So it's not I'm not trying to directly respond to you, to your question. I'm giving a philosophical understanding to everyone as I have it. That's all I'm doing. Okay. So it is a useful discussion. I found it useful when somebody told me. I hope others will find it useful for themselves. That's all I'm doing. Okay. Because you catalyzed the discussion, you sparked the discussion, I'm taking it forward more than what you asked. Okay. Is that okay? You spend a couple of minutes
Yes,
on
please.
this
Yes, please.
topic?
I fully agree. In fact, I really admire your knowledge on Bhagavad Gita and the way you explain. My question, if it had offended you, I should say sorry. But my only question, in fact, it is a question. When I help one person, to that person, I become a messenger of God. God doesn't come here personally to help another person.
Yes.
So when I help, I am a God-sent person for him. That is what I meant.
I see. Okay. So let me explain that also. I will cover both
Okay.
those topics. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So let me now speak and I will cover that as well. Thank you for clarifying your definition. So when we say messenger of God, okay, there are multiple levels. That way I'm also messenger. That, I'm just repeating what Srila Prabhupada has written in Bhagavad Gita. I am bringing this book to you. We send WhatsApp messages. So we are messenger. So in that sense, yes, whoever is transmitting the message of God, we are messengers. That is one understanding. 100% agree. So if that's what you meant, you are correct. I apologize but when I said messenger of God, I had a higher meaning that I wanted to convey. And that message, that messenger of God is the one that is sent by Krishna personally. We can also take the flag and run with it. No problem. Krishna likes it. But there are people whom he has personally sent, the Nitya Siddhas. They are
Yes,
the great.
sir. I agree with you here because we regard as Sai Baba or some other like Srila Prabhupada or somebody. They are what you say here is refers to those people.
Yes, exactly. And those were the examples you gave before
Yes,
also.
they are much at a very much higher level than us.
Correct.
Okay, sir.
And the difference is, there is a difference. Okay, there is a difference there. These people are empowered. Let me put it in red color. These are specially empowered by God, to transmit the message according to time, place, and circumstance.
Yes.
So they know God's message
Yes.
and they will transmit it according to the audience.
I agree, sir.
We, as the messengers, the secondary messengers, I will just invent a new word, second-hand messengers. Let me just invent a word there. We cannot change the message, or cannot not change the message, but cannot change the fact that the teachings. So when Srila Prabhupada, who is an empowered messenger, he says you should, to the devotees who become very serious in bhakti, you should do 16 rounds of japa of Hare Krishna mantra. We, on the other hand, cannot go and say, no, don't do Hare Krishna mantra, just do 16 times name of Krishna. That is enough. Krishna, 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 Krishna. Okay, done. I cannot go and transmit that message. So I must be simply a, what do I call as a repeater. So in that case also I am a secondary messenger, but there is a difference between Nitya Siddhas and those who are trying to become perfect individual souls through their sadhana, the sadhana siddha. These are the peoples who are in progress state. So we can just repeat the message, but we cannot say that the message can be changed based on time, place, and circumstance. Maybe 10,000 years later, when the situation of Kali Yuga will be so degraded that maybe some other messenger of God will come and just say, at least take 16 times the name of Krishna. That itself is enough. But for the message for today, 2021, that is not enough. A serious devotee must spend at least 1 hour, 1.5 hours taking the name of Krishna. Just 16 seconds or half minute is not enough. Maybe 20,000 years later, it will be enough. Some other Acharya, Nitya Siddha, will come and establish that as the rule. That is what is meant by the direct messengers of Krishna. Okay, we are over time, so we will stop here and we will continue this Q&A next week. So next week, actually, there will be no Q&A. Next week, I'll be traveling again. We will have the Bhagavad Gita class main, but no Q&A, because at this time I'll be, I think, on the road. So we will do the Q&A in 2 weeks, but we will continue our Bhagavad Gita class as it is next time.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining.
I do not know. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.